You're listening to the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast, and I'm Lou Temlett. I'm guessing you're having a good day because either you've been on the mats, considering getting on the mats, or maybe you're looking to grow your Jiu Jitsu club. I'm so happy you're here listening or watching this episode. Please don't tap out before the end. When you want to be the cool looking guy, start training Jiu Jitsu. I'd like to welcome Paddy Webber to my podcast. Hi Paddy, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. You all right?
Yeah, doing great, thank you. It's great to be able to chat with you. We've been juggling dates for a while because we are both family people. We have responsibilities in life that go above and beyond ourselves to our kids and rest of the family. So I'm grateful to be able to chat with you and have time. You are joining me from Rising Tide Jiu Jitsu over in Weston-Super-Mare. Tell me about what Rising Tide kind of stands for and what it means to you.
Funny enough, there's actually a funny story about the name, which was that none of us, Martin came up with the name. Have you met Martin, one of the coaches here?
I have met Martin.
There's four of us that run the place, and we were stuck for a name. Martin came up with Rising Tide. None of us were really too keen on it, so we put it to a vote, and it's what came out on top. But since it won the vote, I've now fully adopted it and got behind it. And I think it's a good sort of analogy for us as a team, because before we moved to our own place, we were renting mat space at an MMA gym. We didn't have a massive amount of sessions. We couldn't physically get the mat space. So, us moving into this new venue, widening the timetable, and I mean, we've essentially tripled our members since we moved here. So it's kind of a good analogy for us, I suppose. And we're right on the seaside, so there's that as well.
So Rising Tide, four of you got together and you didn't have a name for the club at all, and it was Martin that just suggested Rising Tide. So what did you think you were going to call this if none of the rest of you had any ideas?
Well, we did have a lot of ideas. So we had I can't remember them all offhand, but there were sort of 8 different ideas that were floating around. The previous name was Checkmat Deviate or Checkmat Somerset. It was Checkmat Somerset. Before that, it was Checkmat Deviate. Sorry, I'm confusing the timeline now. But yeah, when we moved into our own place, we thought we'd sort of like have our own. At that point in time, we weren't currently affiliated with Checkmat. We are again now. Yep. That's all complicated. But we wanted our own name. The second one behind it was Quatro Cantos, which means 4 corners in Portuguese. That came second place. But yeah, there was a lot of ideas, a lot of weird and wonderful names, and this one kind of came out on top of the vote. So we're all behind it now.
I do love it, and it very much, describes the upcoming kind of generation of individuals in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I think it's great. I love your venue, and I was very grateful for you to host my 1-year anniversary of the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast back in 2024, I think, September, which feels like a long, was it 24? No, it was 23. I don't know. It feels like longer. I think it might have been 23, because I've skipped. So I'm now preparing for my 100th episode.
Nice. Well
somewhere on it will be on the 25th of October. I have a little group of us organizing something, but it's likely to be an open mat and something else of sorts. So if you haven't already got the 25th of October in your diary, as well as you, Paddy, put it in your diary now. Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast, 100 episodes. We are growing. So talk to me about the beginning part of your journey, because you didn't start out with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
No, so I've been doing martial arts or combat sports. You could say, if I was really reaching, you could say from as young as 10. I did karate for several years. I was really into it while I was doing it. We at the time, my whole family were doing it, and we couldn't really afford it, and I didn't want to go on my own. So I kind of just stopped. Then when I was 15 and I kind of had like a weekend job and had some money of my own, I started doing traditional jiu-jitsu. Because I'd started watching the early UFCs and the early Ultimate Fighter seasons were on one of the channels that we had at home. And so I started watching MMA, and I sort of noticed jiu-jitsu, saw Hoist Gracie, UFC 1, 2, 3. And I thought, right, I want to do jiu-jitsu. And at the time, I didn't really know much between BJJ or traditional. And in my head, I thought, well, traditional must be the original, the proper jiu-jitsu. So that's what I'll do. And I can't remember if Ian's classes at the time were in Weston. I can't remember if he had a BJJ class in Weston at that time. So it's kind of, it was the jiu-jitsu that was in my town. So I started it.
Yeah. So we're talking about Ian Rossiter, who has previously been on the show. Now, what I know from Japanese jiu-jitsu, it's with weapons. Is that right?
I mean, primarily, no. There is a lot of weapons stuff in it, but I wouldn't say that's the main focus. The main focus is kind of like still hand-to-hand combat, but there's sort of strikes involved. But what I always say to people about traditional jiu-jitsu is it's not that there's anything wrong with the techniques. When I started doing MMA, judo, BJJ, I would see a triangle, an Americana, a Kimura, armbar, and I would know these techniques. So I'd be like, oh yeah, I know that one. I've seen that one. But it was the way you trained was more, he's going to throw a punch, I'm going to block it, I'm going to grab, I'm going to throw, and I'm going to do a wrist lock or something. Yeah. And there wasn't a massive amount of active. There was a bit. In fact, we had like body shields and stuff. We would do like almost like MMA sparring every now and then. And we would roll. For some reason, we started back to back when we rolled. That was one of the weird things about it. You'd sit back to back and then start rolling from there.
That sounds like the kind of, not medieval days, but the guns at dawn or whatever. The kind of dueling.
Yeah, pretty much. There wasn't enough of the sparring and stuff. That would be like maybe like once a month as a treat, we'd be kind of sparring, as opposed to, but you'd be like practicing and copying techniques all the time. And it didn't, I think at the time that I joined, there was a lot of guys there that were kind of 40 plus, 50 plus, didn't really want to spar necessarily anyway. So when there was a couple of young guys there, and we kind of give the coach a nudge and be like, oh, we want to fight. And he'd be like, oh, all right, put your kit on. Whereas for most of the guys there, it was more, they wanted to just kind of learn the techniques and do a bit of self-defense and keep themselves kind of in shape and stuff. And that was, because they could be quite hard sessions, to be honest, that sometimes the warm-up, and people will criticize this nowadays, but sometimes the warm-ups were like very intense, almost like a strength and conditioning kind of feel to the warm-up, and you'd be you could have sessions where you'd come out absolutely knackered. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't just like it wasn't a walk in the park, but it was just an old way of training.
I get it. So at the beginning of the show, I mentioned about wanting to look like the cool guy. So tell me who this cool guy is.
So when I must have been only 15 or 16. So we're talking about 15 or 16 years ago. I was at my traditional jiu-jitsu class. I was a blue belt at the time. And Ian Rossiter came walking in. I had no idea who he was, but he went straight up to my traditional jiu-jitsu, my sensei, Chad Sidaway, and they were chatting away. I don't know what they were talking about. He'd obviously just wanted to see him, and they were catching up. And he had this, he at the time, maybe not so much now, but at the time I thought, oh, he's a pretty cool looking guy. He had a Brazilian jiu-jitsu t-shirt on, and he had tattoos all everywhere. And I thought, what's this guy up to? And turned out he was an old student of Chad's and now was into BJJ. And that's how the connection was made. Soon after that, I started doing some training with Ian. But ultimately, for timetable reasons, it didn't really work out. And I ended up spending a couple of years doing BJJ at Pedro Bessa's instead, and then came back to Ian's later down the timeline.
Nice. So Ian is one of the kind of co-founders, one of the four, with you and Martin, and who's the other guy? Remind me.
So it's Ian's the head coach, third degree black belt, and then you've got Martin, first degree black belt, and then me and Chris are just black belts. Chris Howard. So that's kind of the four.
Fantastic. Nice. Oh, that's where the Quattros, whatever it was, came from.
Yeah, four corners, four coaches. It was that was the idea. That was my idea, but everyone was too embarrassed about trying to pronounce it every time, so we scrapped it.
Love it.
But we didn't scrap it; it lost.
Okay, that's fine. Losing is fine because it's about learning. Don't suggest that name again.
I can tell you plenty about that.
So you've gone through the ranks in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Yep. What's your journey been like through that to black belt?
Pretty varied. So when I was from the space of being a white belt to when I kind of just got my purple belt, in that space of time, I would say I was training like an athlete. I was young. I was heavily committed to training, barely missed a session. And my mindset was totally different. It would almost annoy me when people didn't train to compete, when people just did it I didn't get that at the time. I was like, why would you do that? Then around the time I was in my very early 20s, me and my fiance had already moved out and we had a kid. And then within 14 months, we had 2 kids. And I suddenly realized what the other side of it can be like and how it is trying to balance that with a family. And my career, my job has always been a career, not just a job. And in the same way that people get heavily raveled in jiu-jitsu and obsess about it, I've been like that with my trade in the past. And, you know, it's tricky to balance it all. So I've definitely had moments in time, especially earlier on, where I really was training like a beast. And then from purple belt, maybe partway into brown belt, I was struggling a bit. I had a bit of a rough time of it all. And then from brown belt to now, I've kind of, I'm starting to work out how and when I can train around family stuff. The kids are getting older, so that they're not, you know, babies anymore that need us around all the time. So it's getting easier. But my aspirations are different as well.
Yeah. Let's delve in a little bit to that very intense period for white to the kind of beginning of purple belt, because it may well resonate. It doesn't resonate with me. So I'm seeking to understand what that mindset, what that routine felt like to be in it and be so intense and training like an athlete.
At the time, it just felt, because I was young, and you never appreciate it when you are young and when you have got the energy. You never appreciate that one day you might not have that same energy. So it didn't feel like, that's why I was critical of other people at the time, because it didn't feel that hard. I thought, well, I can train every day, or let's say 1 to 2 rest days a week, depending. I was still working full time then as well. So in my head, I was thinking, there's no excuse. I work full time. You know, I train almost every day, and it's not even that hard. That was how I felt at the time, and it was more changes. You know, when you've got the privilege of going home, and no one's there, besides your partner, and you can just relax and do whatever you want, and you haven't got like now I have to factor in. I'm not gonna tell my kids, no, you can't do that activity because I've got jiu-jitsu that night. You know, well, within reason, there are some nights that are my nights that I train. But I want my kids to be able to do the clubs they want to do and go and see you know, I can't lay all of that onto my partner. And it's, you know, you have to be there. And there are people that aren't. There are probably plenty of kind of athletes that still have that mindset. And if it's their career, that's fair enough. If they compete as a career, absolutely fair enough. That's what you got to do. So there's probably plenty of people that are dads that you know that still train like animals. but yeah, I found out pretty quick and pretty fast that everything wasn't as easy as I thought when I had a family and when I started to, and when my career started to take over as well. When I went from being an apprentice who didn't really care to actually really loving my work and starting to be self-employed and do work on my own, it changed a lot of things.
Yeah, I think being young, having that kind of drive and dedication, looking at other people like, why are you not doing the same as I'm doing?
Yeah.
There's that kind of life lesson that comes only with the duration of time training jiu-jitsu or living life. But it's kind of I want to kind of celebrate that joyous naivety when we're young, when we have the energy, when we have the dedication. We kind of look at other people like, why are you not doing what I'm doing? It's so easy. And I think at every point in our life, we might look at others in that way, but actually the reality, there's so much we don't know about each other. And it's having that understanding that we are only a very small kind of part of the story in ourselves, that everyone and every club have so much complexity either in our lives or, you know, our kind of hobby lives or a competitive life. There's just another level that, you know, as a late teenage, early 20, you don't have that capacity yet. I mean, some people do, but to appreciate what life is going to throw at you. But it sounds like you had quite a good time. You kind of driven through that. Talk to me about some of the really highlight moments in that white to purple.
There was one competition at Blue Belt. I didn't actually do that many competitions at Blue Belt, thinking about it. But there was one competition at Blue Belt where I had some really tough guys in my in my division. I was kind of like, I was a bit sort of scared really going into it. And one of the guys ended up being in Cage Warriors. Another guy was already like quite an accomplished on the amateur MMA scene at the time, all from big gyms, kind of like bigger brand gyms than I was from. And I rinsed the competition, triangled everyone, and won the gold. And that was a really nice thing for me at the time. I got a feeling it was around the time that my fiance was pregnant with our first. So it was one of those where I was like, if I don't win this competition, it's going to be a while before I can do another one. So that was a standout moment. And my first ever competition, when I technically I wasn't even a white belt in jiu-jitsu. I did some MMA because the timeline didn't go traditional jiu-jitsu, then BJJ. There was MMA in there, judo. It was all a bit of a whirlwind. But for a long time, MMA was the main focus. So I was doing traditional jiu-jitsu and MMA. And there used to be a no-gi grappling tournament called Spartan Grapple Challenge in Nailsea. And there's a lot of people that have ended up being big names that did this old show back in the day. It was really not to the standards you see now. And I lost my first match, but I went into the repechage and won 2 more matches and then won the bronze match with a flying armbar. And that's one that just always felt that felt good at the time. I'd been training hard at the time. It was nice to do something cool like that.
This episode is sponsored by Rising Tide Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where getting choked out has never felt so friendly. Seriously though, Rising Tide BJJ isn't just a gym. It's like a big, sweaty, overly supportive family. You'll be welcomed, encouraged, and yes, occasionally armbarred, all in the name of progress. Whether you're brand new or already know your guard from your guillotine, their experienced coaches will help you level up without making you feel like a lost octopus. The vibe is chill, the mats are clean, and the friendships built to last longer than your cardio. Check them out on Instagram at rising.tide.bjj and maybe, just maybe, find your new favourite way to roll around on the floor with strangers.
This is a Jiu-Jitsu Lou podcast with me, Lou Temlett, coming to you from the UK. One of the things that would really help this show grow is by you subscribing on whichever platform you are listening or watching on. If you could do that for me right now, I would be forever grateful. And as always, go and check out the clips on YouTube and Instagram. Today, I'm having a conversation with Paddy Webber. Paddy, so you briefly mentioned about your career, so doing a career rather than a job. That was in joinery. Talk to me about that.
So I almost since school, when I left school, I already knew that I wanted to work with wood in some way or another. I didn't really know carpentry, joinery, what the difference was at the time. But my uncle was a joiner, and he made this like wooden chest for my mum for her wedding present, I think it was. And I sort of said, "Oh, where's that from?" And she said, "Oh, your Uncle Brian made it." And I thought, "Oh, how do you make something like that?" And then that's how I ended up getting an interest in the trade. So about a year and a half after I left school, finally found an apprenticeship in a joinery workshop. So I was kind of like a wood machinist and bench joiner. After that, immediately worked for a building company, doing more site carpentry, and then went on to a lot of other roles within timber. So one of my favorite roles was I worked for a company, the Yo Valley Joinery Company, and they're experts in geometric staircases. So they do high-end furniture and twisty, turny stairs, basically. And it's given me a lot of opportunities in my own life, being a tradesman, doing work on my own houses and stuff. So the house I live in now used to be a post office, for example, and we did a conversion there. So it's been a valuable life tool as well as a job that I've enjoyed.
No, that's really good. And being able to balance your career and jiu-jitsu. Now, when anyone ever mentions a skill or a creative thing or a job, I usually try and combine it with jiu-jitsu or relate it in some parallel way to jiu-jitsu. And joinery probably isn't very much different. Putting pieces together. Talk to me about some of the kind of techniques that you could see parallel with jiu-jitsu.
I can't think, techniques themselves. Is it like with what you do with your hands? If you're making, let's say, a door or something, or a bit of furniture, doesn't really relate entirely. But it's the thinking process of it, of how things go together. Similar to how if you twist this bit of the arm, you hurt someone, and piecing all of the mechanics together. I think it's that sort of mechanical mind thing that translates between the two. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that. I will take the mechanical mind from joinery and putting all the pieces together. When you said about kind of twisting the arm, I'm thinking about kind of chair legs or table legs, and actually you've got to have that level. You can't put it on wrong. When you're building something from IKEA and you've put the screw in at slightly the wrong angle, and then the whole thing doesn't stand up properly. And you probably should have read the instructions and laid all the pieces out beforehand.
Yeah, angles, frames, I suppose, building strong structures, that's something else that kind of relates. Do you know what I mean?
There we go. We'll dig it up. So you've kind of parked joinery, and you're doing groundskeeping now. Talk to me about how that's taking up your time and how it might have impacted on your jiu-jitsu training and coaching.
Yeah. So I was getting quite stressed out because I thought it would be an easier transition for me to go, instead of working for myself, which I was working for myself doing carpentry and joinery, self-employed for sort of like 6 or 7 years. And then I thought, do you know what? I'm going to get a job like kind of on the books with a building company, quite a reputable building company around the town. And that'll be easier to juggle this new problem of running a gym. Albeit there's 4 of us, it's still a lot of hassle to run in a gym. So I thought I'll go and work for this other company. And that was just a nightmare, which I won't go into. But it was not a good fit. And I might as well have been self-employed. I was kind of working that hard for this other company that I thought, well, where's the benefit? So I went back to being self-employed again. This is all within the last 3 years since the gym's opened. And I was just not managing well with the going out. It's not the physical. The physical side of the work is a pain because you're tired when you finish work and you don't necessarily always want to roll, but you drag yourself into the gym. But it was more the mental side of it. You get home, you've got hours of drawings to do, or quotes to type up, emails to get back to. So I was actually playing golf at my local golf club, and they'd been looking for a groundskeeper for ages. And it started with a joke. I said, "Oh, if you don't get someone in here soon, I'll have to apply." And the manager said, "Oh, well, you could do. No one else has." And I was like, I kind of went home and thought about it. One thing led to another. I applied for it, and I got the job. So now I'm a groundskeeper slash, I guess, like a trainee greenskeeper at a local golf club, which is just a beautiful job alongside the gym. It's a very relaxing job. I mean, it isn't. It's hard on the body some days, but generally speaking, you're in a nice environment all day. Outdoors. It's early mornings, but that's all right. And then I get home from work, and then work is done. It's not like it used to be where you get home from work and then the second job starts. It was just done. So working around training and managing the gym is a lot easier now.
Good. Now, do you happen to play golf now, or have you always played golf?
No, not always. I started playing golf for a stag do. Funnily enough, it was going to be part of a stag do that we had to play golf. So I started playing and then just loved it. That's probably 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. I've actually played less golf than ever since I started working at the club. But I love golf. Yeah, right into it.
Yeah. I would agree. I do love golf. I'm not very good on the green, but I'm quite happy at the driving range. I've been playing I've just worked this out, about nearly 16 years. So nice. I should be pretty good. I can't even remember what the club's called. I do like putting, so I do have to take myself off to the putting green occasionally. But I love hitting those long shots. But again, it's having that flexibility. For me, it's those stretches, it's the angles, it's the keeping that relaxed vibe. Because if you don't play golf, then you might think that you just have to go at it with all guns blazing. But one of the things I really enjoyed about golf is that you have to completely relax your shoulders, you have to completely relax your mind and your whole body, and just let the flow happen. And it feels like, completely. And this is, for me, another little bit of grounding that I've taken from another sport and bringing to jiu-jitsu. Always have a go. I love taking the kids down the driving range. We usually play in one of the games where you have to hit the fish or catch the fish on the kind of the green. I usually pick up an old boot, but sometimes a big old shark or a tuna.
I've done the same with the girls.
Love it. So let's go on to talk about competition. As a black belt, do you take part in many competitions now?
I've competed twice at black belt, 2 competitions in 3 divisions. So I've completed twice. The first was the British Open no-gi, which I lost in the first round to Craig Young. Very good guy. Got the win. Yes. He's no complaints from me. The better man won. And then more recently at the Reorg Open, I got a silver in the gi. Won my first match, lost the final, and then I did the no gi, which was all a bit of a weird runaround. I kind of jumped in at the last minute I was meant to be in the Masters no gi, and then I jumped into the adult no gi. I got heel hooked. I've been, like I say, I've had this knee injury. So as soon as the guy looked like he was going for a heel hook, I was like, yep, you got it. It was one of those comps I shouldn't have really done. Excuses. But competed twice at black belt, and I try and compete as often as I can, but it's just tricky to feel comfortable doing a competition, knowing that I've prepared for it. Because there could be months where I've rolled, maybe 4 times in a month, and I've done more coaching than rolling. There could be other months where I've trained every other day. It's trying to still get that balance right and compete at the right time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll enter a competition thinking, oh, I got loads of time to prepare, and then loads of things will crop up and I've not prepared at all. So no, I'm trying, but my aspirations are just to, when I've got, I suppose if I ever get, but when I get a gold or a couple of golds at black belt, I probably will step away from competition entirely. It's not something I've really enjoyed for a long time. It feels like more of an obligation. One of my personal goals was, since a white belt, was just to get gold medals at every belt. And so far I've done that until black belt. So when I finally get that black belt gold medal, I might say, oh, do you know what? I'm kind of done with, I haven't got anything left to prove, because it's, when I started competing, it was sort of like I was a lot younger, and it was more, you know, I'm quite a small guy. Can I win a fight with someone? Do you know what I mean? And there was a lot to prove to myself, especially when I was doing MMA. And, you know, like I say, I came from the generation where you're watching like the Gracies try and beat other martial arts and stuff like that. And now that it's all kind of the circle that I'm in now, it's jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu. So it feels like I've got nothing to prove. We're doing the same thing. Do you know what I mean? I'd like to get to a point where I think we are basically at that point, but it'd be nice to know that the gym is respected in the community. People respect me as a coach. And when they hear about the gym, they go, oh yeah, that's a good gym. Yeah, we know those guys. That's what I'm striving for, is more success for the gym, as opposed to my own personal success. Because if it was all about that, I wouldn't be coaching, and I'd just be traveling around training everywhere. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get that. And I think, you know, competing at any level and having that preparation time, you know, often we will sign up for a competition, and being parents, being kind of, you know, slightly older, we're not the teenage 20-somethings, things happen, we have life to deal with. But what would the preparation for you to win gold look like, Paddy?
A lot of it would be keeping
the ideal preparation.
Ideal prep. So funnily enough, a lot of it would probably come down to what I eat. So I've got quite a temperamental stomach, right? But if I'm eating well and I can keep in that zone of eating well, everything else feels easier. I wake up better. I feel more energy at work, more energy on the mats. And then it's just really getting in the rounds, really, just feeling comfortable on the mat, and making sure, you know, I can get, I don't know, at least 5 rounds in every time I'm in the gym. Because a lot of the time when I'm coaching, I don't roll because it's a busy room and you kind of need to be spotting the mat. But then I'll make exceptions when I've got, you know, when I can, and I'll ask other people to step in and spot the mat so that I can jump in myself. I'll try and get to extra sessions when I'm not coaching, and, you know, when the other coaches are in charge, and just do the lesson and roll with the guys. And obviously it's getting permission from the better half to actually do all of that in the first place.
Of course, because that's where it all starts. It's really interesting that you talk about the food being the priority in being able to enable you to do all of these other things. You know, we really do have to look after ourselves, and what we fuel ourselves with kind of has to be the right thing. And, you know, at whatever age, you know what food impacts you and how you're feeling throughout the day or the week. You know, if you kind of have takeaway food, then you know you feel rubbish the next day. But if you fuel with, you know, kind of great nutrients, kind of healthy proteins and carbs and all the other great things that, you know, we're kind of supposed to eat, life actually is less stressful, less of a problem for other things. And actually our mindset and mood can be a lot calmer and a lot more regulated to deal with some of those difficult roles or maybe other difficult things in life. So thank you for raising the food bit, because I think, you know, I was probably expecting you to say, you know, this much training, this much preparation, whatever, but you've gone right back to the core, which I think, you know, a lot of us need to remember.
Yeah, I'm a bad example as well of what you kind of, because I've always had jobs that are high calorie. I expend a lot of calories at work, so Until recent years, I've been able to get away with eating almost whatever I want and still stay relatively in shape and not really. But the last sort of like 3 years, that hasn't been the case. And I'll get into these zones sometimes for months where I'm eating perfect and you start to feel the benefits. But then I'll get a craving or I'll, have a couple of rogue takeaways, and suddenly I'll forget everything I ever knew about why I was eating well. And I'll just go into this like month-long binge. So I'm not a good example of it. I'm saying I know what I should be doing, but actually doing it is another problem.
No, thank you for sharing, because I think, the reality of life and whilst 1 or 2 days shouldn't take us off track, it often does. And that's the reality. And actually it's okay as long as you then start to understand that that's a thing, notice you're not feeling great, and then come back on track kind of later down the line. It is awareness at the end of the day, knowing that whilst we might be enjoying some lovely high calorie something, that it's not serving in the long run, or at least, in preparation for competition or, hardcore training.
Yeah, that's it.
So talk to me about Rising Tide and the challenge that you have in bringing families into the gym and equally supporting upcoming competitors and all of those people that really want to get to another level in jiu-jitsu.
That's the big, I think that's the big dilemma for a lot of gyms. Although I'm sure there are people that will say, no, it's not, it's easy. But for me, it would be quite easy to put on a session for high level guy. If I knew I had a class where it was all going to be colored belts that were all going to be in pretty good shape and all were like competitive people, it'd be quite easy to just, put a class together with kind of little to no technique and just, specific drill. It'd all work around a theme, but just specific sparring and just kind of blast them essentially and give them some hard training. But the trouble is, when you want to grow members, you want as many classes as possible to fit everyone. So you want to host a class where the competition guys or the higher level guys feel looked after, and they're not just there yawning and it's not too much of a baby in to them. They can have a good training session, but at the same time, someone who's brand new or doesn't have much experience can still enjoy the class and get involved without just feeling lost or without being so overworked that they just think, wow, I can't do that. I'm not coming back. And obviously you can have separate classes for both, which we do. But I think having a good general purpose class most days of the week, it's good for memberships, and it's good for keeping the kind of community together so that these type of people, you don't have the new guys that are secluded in the beginners class, and you don't have the other guys in their own kind of high level snobby class. Do you know what I mean? It's all that there's a session every day of the week or most days of the week where everyone can come together. Extra sessions are all well and good, but also value for money. You want people to be able to come to all of the sessions on their timetable and not, pay for their membership and then go, oh, I can only turn up to beginners 2 to 3 times a week, but I want to train more than that. So it's tricky getting the balance right. We're trying. I think we do, generally speaking, do a good job of it, but it's always a work in progress.
Yeah. I think as the sport grows, clubs really do have an absolute challenge to, deal with the new people coming into the sport that may have never done martial arts or any combat sports before, and the balance of the highly competitive, because to make a great club, you kind of need both. There needs to be that balance, but equally there needs to be that tranche of people in the middle that might then tip into the kind of higher competitive, maybe only once a year, but occasionally, so that it's actually driving them on. and just kind of pushing them. I don't envy your roles and responsibilities in running a club, but I do admire the dedication that you all put into, growing and developing Rising Tide, because it's a fantastic space. I know that there are some judo classes. Do they still happen? Not through Rising Tide, but it's a shared mat sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So Western Judo, big shout out to Western Judo. They're based here. They have a couple of sessions a week. Our mats actually were from Western Judo. So me and Ian have got a long-standing relationship with Western Judo because we both have had our kind of time in judo. We're both judo brown belts. And we used to we've trained with them for years, but they were in sports halls with kind of trolleys taking out the mats every session. And we sort of said to them, look, we're setting up this grappling gym, this jiu-jitsu gym. Do you want to come with us? So the kind of deal is they've got a free venue and we've got free mats. Or I say free, it's still very much their Western Judo's mats. If they ever wanted to leave, we would have to shell out for some new mats. But no, we've got a good relationship. There's not as many people that cross train as you would think, actually. But we still have judo in the house. I mean, one day I want to get back in there, do a few more competitions for my black belt, but I'm going to wait till my knee's a bit better for that, I think.
There's always has to be some sort of recovery. I think I know you've only just approached Masters, but I think people experience injuries at any level, but it feels like it might not be the reality that in Masters, we kind of suffer a little bit more. Woe is me, recovering from a rib injury or whatever. But we're blessed and grateful to be part of the jiu-jitsu journey as a whole, and just knowing that we can do this for a long time. It's not a one-hit wonder. We're not in our 20s. We want to be training until our 80s and 90s. Well, that's what I'm writing on paper at the moment.
100%.
This is a long game. Paddy, how can people follow your journey if they're not already?
I suppose mostly Instagram. Rising Tide is on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. All the coaches are on Instagram, and Facebook as well. We have a Facebook page for Rising Tide, but mostly I suppose Instagram would be where the most content is to follow the gym or to follow what I'm up to.
Good. I will put the links in the show notes. Now, I just want to mention that you very regularly run white belt competitions. Have you got anything coming up, and kind of how is the vibe for these competitions?
The plan was to run them regularly. We run one, which was very well attended, and we had a lot of, we were all buzzing afterwards. We had floods of messages coming in saying how much they enjoyed it and can't wait to come back for the next one. The next one was supposed to be on the 8th of June. Is it 2 weeks or 1 week away? 8th of June it was supposed to be. And we've actually just not cancelled it. We've postponed it because we had plenty of people registered. But you know how on Smooth Comp you can register and not pay?
Yeah.
So we had lots of people registered, but not many people actually signed up. And it got to a point where we thought, if we're going to cancel it due to low numbers, we need to do it sooner rather than later, because we don't want to be letting people down too close to the date. So we've actually just cancelled this one, which is a shame. But I think it's a busy time of year. People have got holidays and stuff going on. So we're going to try again, because our first one was just so good. The atmosphere was incredible. I've been to sub-only shows that had, there was more atmosphere on the moon, but our little interclub here was very, very good. And we try to make it affordable for everyone. Everyone gets at least 2 matches per category. So it's a good one for the experience. So hopefully probably winter time now, or maybe early next, spring next year, we'll come back again. It's definitely coming back.
Good. I love seeing all the promotion. It's just an exciting thing. As a white belt, sometimes you might not want to do some of the bigger competitions, but going over to Rising Tide, being part of that kind of, sub-only vibe, if you've never been part of it before. But if you're pre-registering on Smooth Comp, please complete so that these competitions can actually happen.
This is what no one... Sorry, carry on.
No, carry on.
Okay, this is what everyone, and it's always the issue on smooth comp at any tournament is people don't commit. If you want to do a competition, and this is what I've essentially always done, if I'm going to do a competition, I'll sign up for it and pay for it in one go, done, I'm doing that competition. Then I'm not sitting on the fence. So because everyone looks and goes, oh, he's not paid yet, so I won't pay yet, and then no one ever does it. If you just were decisive and thought, I'm going to do that competition, because you're going to get a refund if no one's in your category, generally speaking. So, or you'll get a merge, or if you really want to do that competition, just book it and pay for it, because then you've got more chance and a longer amount of time to get that match, rather than, because there'll be the same people that moan and go, oh, well, no one signed up. And it's like, but you didn't sign up. That's the smooth comp issue is it's not smooth comp's fault, but that's something that's always a bugbear for me. Yeah.
I get it. When I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with my nan, kind of learning life skills. And there were two things she taught me that stay very much in my mind. One, how to speak correctly, which is why I'm doing podcasting. And two, be more decisive. When you make that decision, you can go with it and then you can move on and work towards that goal, rather than going, oh, I'm not really sure, maybe I will, half-heartedly. Go for it, make that decision and do that thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Good stuff. Paddy, I'd like to thank you so much. It's been fantastic chatting with you. And look forward to heading over to Rising Tide, because I know you have open mats on a Sunday. So I will hopefully see you very soon.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Good stuff. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for telling your friends about this show. And as soon as this episode ends, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show, rating it and a review. And if you haven't already, put Saturday, October the 25th in your diary for Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast 100 episodes. Thanks again for listening. Catch you on the next episode of the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast.